Okay, for the final video on instruction on paper 2, I want to talk about bibliographies, works cited, reference, all that stuff, the kind of intertwined terms that make no sense and are kind of confusing when they're all intertwined like that. So let's separate them and make them really clear. So you know what full text citations are. We've talked about those. You know what in-text citations are. We've talked about those. And the full text citations are listed at the end of a paper in, usually in MLA, a works cited, right? So that would look something like this. A works cited page, this will look familiar to you, with an MLA format. Of course, this is pre-2016 MLA format. Now they do require the URL in the full text citation. They look like this. We know the last name of the author is sticking out here, and they're in alphabetical order all the way down. I want to show you a quick trick. So you see how the last name of the author is sticking out, and it's doing that so we can easily identify it quickly when referring to from an in-text citation to a full text. Well, there's a way to get it to do that without a tab in. If you tab in, it's going to get all funky monkey pretty quickly. So if I highlight this, and then I right-click to paragraph, and from here, you're going to see that there's no special. Under the special column, it's not special. So that's what your citations might look like. A lot of yours do look like that in this class. If you highlight the section that you want to have something called a hanging indent, that's how we get it right. That's how we get it so the last name of the author is sticking out, like its butt sticking out. Then you highlight it, right-click, paragraph, special, hanging, okay, and that's correct. That's called a hanging indent. So do that for all works cited pages going forward, all of them going forward. Okay, so this is the traditional works cited page you're used to seeing in MLA. It's called works cited. The only difference between MLA and APA, besides how we list information here, the nitty-gritty of how we list it is different as well. But also, instead of being called works cited right here, it's called references. So it would look like this. It's called references. There's a bit of a header difference as well, but for the most part, just the title change and then how you list information is different as well in APA. Okay, so then you know the difference now between works cited and references. Well, what the heck is an annotated bibliography in all of that stuff, in all of that weirdness? This is a student annotated bibliography supposed to be in MLA. So this student example is a really good example of what an annotated bibliography is. First of all, she has her title wrong. It should just be annotated bibliography, not highlighted, or bold, I mean, and centered. One more space down. There, that's how it should look. Notice that they're all not bold and they're all centered. That's the correct way of doing it. Okay, so in this student example, you will notice that right after the full text citation, that's the full text citation, it ends right there. She wrote a full sentence describing the source. She put it starts right after the citation. I understand that it is not a space down and a paragraph. I understand it is supposed to be immediately after the full text citation ends, and then also part of that hanging indent format, just like this. So this is an annotated bibliography, and they serve a couple of really important purposes. Annotated bibliographies are exchanged by researchers and research teams. Usually you do not work alone in a vacuum in this world. Usually you'll have 5 or 6 people working with you when you get a job if you're doing a research project. And the people that are working with you will take the responsibility of reading some sources, and you'll take the responsibility of reading others, because you all cannot read thousands and thousands of pieces of information or hundreds of sources. You just can't do that. You don't have the time. So in this instance, you would divide out the workload. You would write up annotations for those sources, and then you exchange annotated bibliographies. This would give your fellow researchers a sense of what is in the sources, and if they felt they were central to the project, if your team decided they were central, everyone could go back and read the central ones while just getting the main points, just the paraphrase and summaries of the other sources. So they're really useful tools for exchange and research. They're also really useful tools for people like me who are evaluating work to make sure that you're on track and reading your sources. They're also really super useful tools for you. Let me tell you why. When I write a research paper, I actually make my annotations. I love annotated bibliographies. I never skip it. I make my annotations so big, and I actually put in-text citations in my annotations. You can see an example of that here. I will put the main point of the whatever I'm reading. I paraphrase. I put the main point, the subpoints, some pieces of information that I might use in my actual research paper. So I actually start writing the paraphrases in my annotations, not just generally describing loosey-goosey what the source is about, which is what kind of the guidance is for annotations on what to do. I go really deep, and here's why. I can copy and paste those annotations then in my research paper. I did the work once, I did it right, and I don't have to go back and read the sources again. So this is an example of one of my annotated bibliographies from a while ago in my graduate school days. So I could use this then in my actual research paper, just copy and paste a lot of the annotations here. Now, if you notice that the student example does not do that, and the student example is still a very good example of an annotation, but it is just the main point. It is just a quick summary of the work. I prefer if you paraphrase and you actually do attribution in your paraphrase too. So my example here isn't even as detailed as I would like yours to be. I would actually like to see you doing attribution where you introduce who the author is and some credentials about the author, where they went to school, where they work, how long they've worked there, what is their degree. So that would be the perfect annotated bibliography in my view, with full citations in them and the main point, the subpoints, and any supporting evidence. Now, this takes a really long time, but when you go to write your paper, it's going to be boom, 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 super, super quick. You're going to be very impressed about how quick it'll be when you write your paper if you do this level of detail. So now you know the difference between an annotated bibliography. They're the same kind of, you write stuff up. Either it's MLA or APA. You just write stuff up that you're going to use in your research paper. The level of detail you go into is up to you. Obviously, there's a difference in the full text citation between APA and MLA, and then they're both called annotated bibliography. You know what a works cited page is now, and you know a reference page. Now, what the heck when you hear works consulted or working bibliography? What is that? Well, that is a list of every single thing that you've even consulted, that you've even looked at, whether or not you plan to use it in your research paper. So an annotated bibliography really centers on works that you are going to use in your research paper. You're pretty sure you're going to use them. You don't have to, but you're pretty sure. A works consulted is even more rudimentary than that. It's just the list of all the works that you even looked at briefly. And so it gives researchers who don't even know where to start a way to start collecting information. So an example of what that might look like then, if I go here, an example of what that might look like is that in a works consulted, there are no annotations at all. And it would just say works consulted at the top. And that's it. But for the next paper, you're going to actually write an annotated bibliography. You're not doing a works consulted. So the importance of annotated bibliographies are making sure that they're appropriate, credible, balanced, and timely for your research. So if you're researching modern electronics, you wouldn't want to use a paper from the 1950s talking about electronics. That wouldn't be appropriate or timely. And when I say credible, remember, you are responsible for the credibility of all sources in this class, even if you get them off the internet. If they're fake, New sources, you're responsible for that and will be judged as such. This is just a learning class, so don't worry too much about it for making mistakes. This is your safe place to learn, but I'll mention it if I notice that they're fake.